Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Diamond Valley Writers Guild June meeting. Good morning. I would like to ask everyone on Zoom to please mute your mics, and then when it's time, if you have something you want to say, we'll recognize you can unmute at that time. It just makes it a little cleaner. Real quick on the anthology, it's going very well. We have multiple submissions. We actually have enough right now to do an anthology, but we did extend the deadline to the end of this month because we had people that were working on things but had graduations and kids' last days of school and finals and all kinds of interesting things going on, and said, can we have a little more time? So we did extend it to the end of the month. If you have not gotten your submission in, please submit. The more the merrier. We'd love to have a nice, well-rounded, cross-genre anthology. And just a reminder, the theme of the anthology is animals, or our animals. It's wild or domestic, beloved pets or rascally pests, even mythical creatures. The animal must be integral to the story or poem, not merely a cute, cuddly cameo, although they need not be the central character. They should inform or be essential to the plot or impact the main character in a meaningful way. Standard format you can find on our website, but it's 12-point double-space Times New Roman 1-inch margin, submitted as a Word doc, and do not put your name on the manuscript because the initial readers, don't want to have any biases. We just want to read the work and see if it fits. 1,800 words or less, cannot be previously published unless it was in straitjackets. Prose or poetry is accepted, and each member can submit up to 4 pieces. So two poetry and 2 prose. There are, no excerpts from chapters or longer works. And of course, you must be a paid member in order to be in the anthology. So we do have all those guidelines on the website. I have flyers up front if you want to pick up the guidelines. And again, ignore the deadline at the bottom. It has been extended. Website, Kevin.
Hey there. On the website, I've been adding a few things into the resources section of the forum, as well as we're thinking about starting a tech tips section of the meeting, and I put in a little poll, a blog post poll on the homepage that you can click on to tell me what kind of computers you have, what software you use, more or less just try to gain some insight into what I could possibly provide tech tips that would actually help everybody. So definitely visit the website and check them out, as well as all of the information about the anthology is right underneath of the speaker promo banner. That's about it.
Thanks, Kevin. For those that don't know, Kevin is our vice president of Diamond Valley Writers Guild. He also lives in Canada. Shout outs, new releases, and celebrations. Lynette, do you want to plug that?
Good morning, everybody from Montana. If you are a member of the Writers Guild, you can send in every month your latest publications, any celebrations, book launches, anything that's exciting that's going on with your writing. And we will send that out to our entire mailing list. And please make sure on your book publishing that you send me a cover, JPEG cover picture, the sales link, and a small blurb telling what your story's about, because we would like to promote you guys to everybody so that you can get more readers. I'm sorry, my brain is a little tired and I forgot what else I'm supposed to talk about.
I think that's fine.
Is it okay?
Move on to Kidlit? Yeah, go ahead and go on to Kidlit.
Yeah. Our Kidlit group is up and running now. We are meeting once a month. Our next meeting is this coming Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And it's one of the great perks of being a member. So make sure you renew your membership. And we are going to be supporting our writers who write for children and middle grade and young adult. And so you can bring 5 pages. We'll talk about it. We'll also talk about different craft building exercises. So see you guys on Monday.
Excellent. Lynette is our member at large. She's also on the board of directors and a huge asset to this guild. I did want to segue onto that a little bit, or add on to that a little bit. in that she mentioned you need to be a paid member in order to have your celebrations, your book releases announced in the membership. At last count, we have 437 people who are getting our emails. Now, we don't have membership paid that high, unfortunately, but we do have 437 people that get that email. And also your book goes onto our website. If you have any books out on Amazon or other publishers, there are links for buys. That $25 a year membership really is a very valuable and cheap membership price. So we'd love you to become members. If you could, Lynette or somebody, could you put into the chat the information on how to join if they're interested? We can do PayPal, checks. If you're in the room and you're not a member, you can always just give $25 to our treasurer today. But I wanted you to be aware that we offer a lot for our $25 membership. Now I'm going to turn this over to Jessica to talk about volunteers.
You guys are going to get real tired of seeing me talk about this. So if you want to help us do the hybrid system, which makes meetings like this happen, you can come talk to any of us in the back, especially Liam or myself, and we'll get you set up. Today we had 2 people helping. Thank you so much, Tia, and thank you, Angela. We really appreciate you guys, but we can always use more help to get this up and running even faster. You can learn the hybrid system and maybe even one day set it up yourself and do it yourself. So if you want to help us out, we'd really appreciate it. Feel free to talk to Liam or myself at the end of the meeting. Again, this is only for people who are willing to make the drive. So Lynette, I know you're in Montana. That's a long drive for you to make to come set this up. So don't bother. It's okay. So that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. I think someone's trying to come in. Yep, we have someone else walking in. Welcome. That's okay. Better late than never, as they say. So let's move on to member successes. Member successes. Project starts, completions, recent publications. Does anyone in the room have any of those to announce? Okay. What about, you got to go to that mic.
Hi.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. My name is Tia, and this is my second meeting. And I actually do more copywriting, so I write long-form reports and press releases, etc. And a success, I guess, is I've had some interesting things happen to me here in Hemet. I don't live in Hemet, but I've been doing some business here recently. And okay, I'm going to usurp myself and let the cat out of the bag, but I'm writing a press release about it, and I'm going to mention the Diamond Valley Writers Guild. So I see that as a success. Peace.
Thank you so much for giving us some promotion. We appreciate that. Anybody on Zoom have a recent publication, an announcement, some success they'd like to announce? Anybody on Zoom?
I'll
Okay,
step
Lynette,
up really quick for Dennis. Dennis Conrad is at a big homeschool convention in Ontario this weekend, promoting his books about coin collecting. And so we're really proud of him getting out there and representing not only the guild, but getting out there and selling some books. So that's exciting for Dennis.
He was very disappointed he couldn't be in 2 places at once this morning. Let me tell you, he was very excited about coming, but it was a conflict for him. I think Bob had something to say. Can you go to the mic, Bob?
Hi, my name's Bob Norman. The last time I stepped up here was just before the end of the year. I had a book that was being published through BookBaby. I didn't publish it to become a great renowned writer, but I'm surprised it has sold both on Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. The split has been pretty even between the hardbound editions and the electronic books. It's a book of short stories. It's called Tall Tales, Wicked Lies, and the Awful Truth. Mainly humorous. I think there's 36 stories in there. So I'm happy. I mean, I actually got a book done, which was a huge step forward for me. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And if you've never read Bob's writing, he has a very witty, sardonic humor. It is so fun to read his work. It's even better when he's reading it. At our October meeting, we have our prose readings, and he usually reads something, and he's got everybody laughing. So hopefully you'll show up for that in October, and he'll read something. Any other successes? Anyone else publish a book, win an award, looking on Zoom? Signed up for a conference, anything that they monumental, just started something, maybe finished something. Anybody? Okay, so no one's writing out there. Good to know. We're going to move on then to our tech tip. Usually we do a writing tip or a tech tip every month. The person who was doing our writing tip, she had some health issues. The last couple of months we didn't have any tips, and our members missed the tips. So we're going to now alternate as best we can between writing tips and tech tips, little things that authors need to know that seem pretty intuitive, but to some people, doing things on that computer can be a little difficult. You're maybe a great writer, but trying to get things sent in because you don't even know how to attach a file can be a little bit difficult. So I'm going to turn this over to Jessica. She's not going to come to the mic. She's going to share her screen and go over a little tech tip.
Hello, everyone. It's my disembodied voice. So I am going to be showing you how to properly attach a file to be sent out. You can just look at the screen. I know everyone in the room, you're trying to crane and look at me. That's all right. You don't have to make eye contact. So as you can see here, I have a nice little story that has been written. It's an example story. And so I'm planning to send this in for the anthology. So to do that, I want to attach a file, a Word file. And to do that, you're going to start, this is in Google Docs, by the way. This is not in Microsoft Word. This is in Google Docs. So you're going to go over here to File, up right next to Edit, View, and all that. You're going to go to File. It's going to create this drop-down menu right here, and there's a lot of them. You're going to see this Share, and you're thinking, oh, I want to share this with the world. Don't touch it. That's a trap. What you're actually going to go down to is Download, and you're going to go over to Microsoft Word. That's going to create a .docx file. You can see it. It'll say right there. It has all these different types of files in here that are different types, and it gives you the actual little ending there. But you're going to look for the docx file. Once you press that, it is going to download. It is going to download it up to the top here. Now, depending on the browser you're in, it'll be in different places. Sometimes Chrome puts it on the bottom. If you have Mozilla Firefox, that might be up on top like here. This is Google Chrome that I'm using. So Google Chrome is up on the top right here. And you're going to see that it has your now work. It's going to have a little W on it. That means that it is now a Word doc. So what you're going to do is you're going to go over to your inbox. I'm using the Diamond Valley Writers Guild for now. And you are going to compose a new email. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to recipients and you're going to type in DVWG submissions. You are then going to put in the title. Like that, by whoever you are. Right? Now, there are a couple ways that you can attach the file from here. You're going to put in your little message saying, please submit me, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to go down to this nice little attach files. It's a little paperclip, because how you attach files in real life. Yes, it is that intuitive. And you're going to go over to the little paperclip, and it's going to open a whole bunch of things. You're going to find yours right here that's going to say, it should be at the top of your downloads, because you downloaded it to your computer. You're then going to just press OK and attach it. You'll see it at the bottom here. If you want to check it, you can always click on that and it'll open up or download another one. That's not necessary, but you can always double check that it actually works. And from there, you are just going to press send, and it is going to send it forward. Now, if you don't want to send it to somebody like submissions, you want to send it to your best friend. I will send it to my best friend. And you're going to put her email in, and instead you don't want her to make edits because she might do something better than you. So you're going to make sure that you go to, one moment, you're going to go over here and you're going to go back to your Word doc that you have in Google. So you're going to go to File, and instead of sending her a Word document that she can edit on her own, you're going to go back to Download and go down to PDF document, and it'll have the .pdf there. You're going to press that, and it's going to download it again because you're downloading it to there. So here it is. Now it has the little PDF flag on it, and what you're going to do is you're going to go back. Oops. That was not what I wanted it to do. One moment. It decided to move itself everywhere but where I wanted it to go.
And just real quick, everybody remember that we are recording the meeting. So if you want to review what Jessica's sharing with you, look for our YouTube channel and rewatch this section of the meeting.
There we go. Can everyone still see my screen? No. There we go. Now we're back. Now we're cooking with fire. Okay. So you're going to go back there. You now have your PDF document downloaded, and it's still over here. You can see it. It has the little red PDF flag. You're going to go back to your inbox. Then instead, you're going to go down here, and you're going to see that it says the PDF document with the little red flag. You're going to click that, click open, and now it's attached as a PDF. And you can click that and verify it. It may open up something else, depending on your settings, or it'll download it, so now you have another one to verify if it actually works. From there, you just press send, and everybody gets what they want. Now, there is another way, and you know how in math class, how they would teach you the really complicated way to solve a problem, and then they'd be like, but here's a shortcut. Here is your shortcut for this. So what you're going to do is when you come to here, you're going to go back to file. Everything happens in file. This is where the magic happens. And instead of pressing download, you're going to go to email, and you can say email this file. What you're going to do is you're going to come in here, and you're going to pick somebody. I'll send it to myself. And you're going to have whatever you want. I'll just put that. You can put your message, and then you're going to select your file type. This is the same thing that you were doing with the download. You're either going to select your file type to Microsoft Word, or you're going to send it as a PDF. Again, they are always the same. You're not going to want to touch the HTML or the plain text. That does a completely different thing, and it doesn't send it as a file. It just sends it as text for you to copy. So you're going to make sure that you press Microsoft Word, and you're going to press send. From there, it sends directly from here. However, we prefer that you do it by attaching the file and sending it that way. Okay, any questions?
Anybody in the room have any questions? Okay, anybody on Zoom? And for some of you, I know that was incredibly basic, but again, we're trying to help people because we've had a lot of questions on how do we submit to the anthology, particularly from first-time writers or people who have not done a lot of submitting other than through maybe a website. Jessica, thank you so much for that amazing presentation. And I am so looking forward to seeing more than 2 paragraphs of, what was it, The Lobster's Flight?
The Lobster's Flight, yes.
PDF, there's nothing else. It's just the 2 paragraphs. The rest is that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that tech tip. Okay. So we're going to now move on to our featured speaker. Dennis K. Crosby. He's an award-winning author of the Cassidy Simmons novels, Death's Legacy, Death's Debt, and Death's Despair. Since 2020, he has published 3 urban fantasy novels and 9 short stories in the horror and supernatural thriller genres. Dennis holds a master's degree in forensic psychology and a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing. With experience in retail sales, private investigation, and social services, Dennis uses his knowledge and experience to craft compelling characters, experiencing real-world challenges against the backdrop of magical, supernatural, mythological phenomena. He's been the subject of several interviews and podcasts, a guest speaker in multiple conferences, and a panelist at both WonderCon and Comic-Con International in San Diego. Dennis does reside in San Diego. He drove up, actually went to LA first yesterday, came from LA to here. We are very, very pleased to welcome Dennis Crosby.
Good morning. Yeah, I had an event last night in LA, so I had to leave work about noon, drive to LA. The traffic is ridiculous. I was looking at GPS and it said you have 29 miles to go. You'll be there in an hour. And I'm like, it's ridiculous. Why? Why so long? Thank you for the introduction. Thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to be here, happy to share this information with you all. As was mentioned in the bio, I do have experience as a private investigator. So my career trajectory took a sharp detour during those PI days. I actually started out in retail. I used to work for home improvement centers. So I'd worked for one in the Chicago area, and Home Depot moved into town, put us out of business, so I went to work for Home Depot. All that time I was in college working on a degree in criminal justice. My plan was to become a police officer, transfer to the federal level, work 20, 25 years, retire, get a nice pension, move to California, open a bar, and run a PI business from the attic upstairs. Clearly I was influenced by television, and most of that did not happen. I did complete my degree, my undergrad degree. I started moving toward law enforcement and realized, at the time at least, I was making more money at Home Depot, so I stayed for a little while until I got bored, and then decided to branch out and become a private investigator. So I worked for a small company, and I was able to work under the company license. We're going to talk about that a little bit during the presentation. But the idea of becoming a private investigator was something that I wanted. I enjoyed it. It can be a fun life. And the reason that I started doing this presentation is to remind folks, especially writers, that what you see on television, what you see in the movies, is not entirely accurate. I never had a Ferrari. I did not get into car chases, high-speed car chases. I did not do gunfights in old bars. Didn't even carry a gun, in fact. So it is about really getting it right and making the character authentic. I once read a story in which the main character was a private investigator. I'm like, okay, great. So they're checking on cheating spouses because that's what they think we all do. And this particular character was working on trying to find somebody, doing a locate. And there was one particular portion of it that made me realize that either this author had done their due diligence and interviewed a PI, or they were a former PI themselves. And it was something very simple. It was the PI getting garbage and going through the trash, which is actually an essential element of the job. So those little nuances can really help someone who's actually in the field feel kind of respected. And we talk about research a lot when we're writing, right? So if you're writing about a doctor, if you're writing about a veterinarian or a soldier, you want to interview those people to make sure that the character you're developing is authentic. Same for this. We want to make sure that we are honoring the folks that do that job, but you also want to lend some authenticity to it, because the more authentic you can be, the more you're going to capture your reader's attention. So we're going to start out with just a little bit of history of the PI stuff, and then we're going to get into some tips and tricks that you can utilize to make your PI feel and sound a little bit more authentic. How many people are writing mystery novels or write mystery? Got one here. How many online? Well, the beauty of this is, even if that is not your main genre. So, like, for example, my first 3 novels are urban fantasy. My main character is a private investigator. She specializes in a particular subset of the field. And while the story is mainly about Greek gods and monsters, there are some pieces that kind of touch on that profession. And so even if you have a peripheral character, or if you have someone that's thinking about becoming a PI, or if you have just a nosy side character who likes to dig around in other people's trash, you can make your character sound authentic, even if that is not the primary subject of your story. To get my PowerPoint back. There we go. All right. Okay. So, essentially, what is a private investigator? So, it is a person contracted by an individual or group who is tasked with performing investigative duties. Seems very simple, right? I give you money, I tell you what I need, you find the stuff out for me, you give it to me, and then we go our separate ways. Or you don't find it and I get mad at you, and that's the kind of thing that happens as well. The first known detective agency was created in France in 1833 by Eugene Francois Vidocq. He is credited with developing record-keeping systems. So an essential component of the PI job is note-taking, is records, is creating reports. It is the tedious part of the job. It is like any job, right? You get to do the hard work and the fun work, but at some point you have to write down what you did and show somebody what you did, right? I'm in social service now. I have to do that all the time. I hate it. I love talking to my clients. I love sitting down with them. I love taking them to lunch or to coffee. I love laughing with them. But then at some point, I've got to actually jot down what we did and what we talked about to make sure the next person that works with them understands what's happening. This is an essential component of any investigation. Cops do it all the time. It also happens in the private sector, and it has to happen in the private sector because at some point during your investigation, depending on the type of PI you are, you might get called into court. If you are called into court, your reports will be called up for evidence. You need to be able to make sure that you can recall what you did during the course of that investigation so that it matches up with perhaps what's on your video or what's on your photos. So it's essential to make sure that those systems are accurate and in place. The next PI agency was created in 1852, Charles Frederick Field, and that happened in England. And then probably the most famous agency is the Pinkertons. You've all heard of them. Came around the 1850s. Very famous for being involved in a lot of political things, but they were the PI company to be involved with at the time. The most famous in history, at one point, the number of detectives they had rivaled the U.S. Army. So they had people all over the country working different agencies, or working in different cases. They were instrumental in developing information through just undercover work and getting that sent into the government or whoever it was that hired them. They were controversial in some respects because they were thought to be breaking up unions, utilizing that work to break the unions up to benefit the corporations, right? But at the same time, they were also working for the union to find out things about the corporation. So, split your hairs there. They are also credited with hiring the first female PI in history, who was Kate Warren. That's 1856. They hired her, trained her, and she ended up actually running her own office in Chicago a couple years after that. So, types, duties of private investigators. It's kind of an all-encompassing thing, right? So, being a private investigator means that you can do a lot of different things. You can specialize in a lot of different things. The license itself allows you to work in that field, but you can specialize in certain things. So you can specialize in only working criminal cases, which can be difficult because you are in the private sector. Those in the public sector, the police, feds, state police, they don't necessarily want people investigating their work. They don't want people bothering them. They don't want people competing with them. So it becomes very tricky if you don't have a good relationship with those organizations. So if you are writing about a PI, that can be a source of tension for your story. PIs not traditionally, can have some tension with certain towns. I know when I used to go out and work in small towns, smaller than Hemet even, I would have to check in. Well, I didn't have to, but it was common courtesy to check in with the local police or sheriff's department if it was that small and they didn't actually have a police department. I'd check in, let them know what I was doing, and in some cases I would see the police kind of circling me they'd find out where I was and they'd just kind of be there all the time. One, to make sure I was legit and doing the job I said I was doing. But in some cases, I think it was a little bit more than that. They wanted their small town to be safe, and it's a small place. People know each other. You're in my town investigating my neighbor or my son's football coach. I don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna stick around here so that people can kind of see me. And if they see me, they're going to see you, and that's going to screw everything up. Again, could be a good source of tension for your story. You can work civil cases. Civil cases can be anything from tracking money that's been embezzled to the thing that we hate the most, the domestic cases. I say we, I mean I. Domestic cases are those cheating spouse cases. I detest them. I loathe them. And I'll tell you why. One, because people think that's all that PIs do. Cheaters did not do us a good service by being on the air and being a successful trash TV show. Every time I told somebody that's what I did, they assumed I was hiding in bushes, waiting for that gotcha moment to get the husband coming out of the hotel room or the girlfriend's apartment, and it's a nightmare to be thought of that way. It's also a nightmare to work those cases because no one's ever satisfied. Wife comes to me and says, my husband's cheating. I know he's cheating. This is where he's going to be. I need you to follow him, find out what's happening. Follow the guy for 4 days. Nothing's happening. The guy goes to work. He comes home. He goes to the gym. He comes home. Nothing. Well, I know he's doing something. You're not doing your job. I'm not paying. Okay. All right. So whether you find something or not, no one's ever really going to be satisfied. If you do find something, they're mad because their marriage is now over. They've got proof, hard proof, that their spouse has been cheating on them. They're going to get just as mad at you for that as they are for you not finding anything. Again, why I hate these cases. Also a good source of tension for your character if you're writing that in a book. There are insurance cases. So PIs can do insurance claims or investigate insurance claims. That was kind of the bread and butter of the work that I did. Company that I worked for, we had a lot of companies that were contracting us to find out if people were violating their work comp insurance. So we get a case with somebody that said, I got injured on the job, I have a bad back, I can't go back to work because of this injury. Now they've been off for 2 years. Company calls us and says, our doctor says they're capable of working. He says he can't. He's got a doctor that's saying something completely different. Follow him for 2 days. Let's see what happens. So my job is now to pick that individual up from his house, follow him everywhere he goes and see what he's doing to see if he's breaking any of those restrictions that he claims he cannot break. Gold mine. Bad back. Okay, so why are you re-roofing that house? Why are you building a deck? How are you installing a window on the second floor from the outside? Those things happen. People in pool leagues. I had one gentleman that said he could not go back to work, but he's in weightlifting competitions in Florida. How did I find that out? MySpace. Social media. People are stupid. They love putting pictures of things that they're doing on social media. It's a gold mine. Process serving. Serving a summons. Serving somebody a subpoena. Again, kind of a thankless thing. It's one of those things that is kind of on a lower end of the job spectrum. So it's something you get paid for by the service. Depending on the company you're working with, it could be anywhere from $25 to serve to $100. Just kind of depends on how much money they've got to play with. Technical countermeasures. By this, I'm talking about bugs, putting in listening devices, putting in hidden cameras. I have done that with a couple of places. They thought that people were embezzling money, stealing money from their register. The camera system they had in their store was fake. It was just there to be a deterrent. It wasn't actually working. So we had to install some cameras that actually did work, and we made sure that we put some directly over the registers, a couple in the break room. We had some listening devices in some other areas. All of that was legal because it was given, the job was given to us by the owner. He owned the store, so we were able to do that. Yes? Sure, I don't mind.
Yeah, I have a question about that. Installing the cameras in the retail store, and it was by the owner. I don't know if this was a large corporation or maybe it was just a small mom and pop. But if you put something to the break room, don't you have to tell the employees?
Yes and no. You have to tell them that things are being monitored, but you don't necessarily have to tell. Like you said, it was a mom and pop store. You can tell them that things are being monitored, that we take and it's for security. You don't have to tell them why, but you can tell them it's for security purposes. And it's up to those individuals as to what they do with that information from there. Corporate investigations. So investigating any corporate espionage, people stealing secrets from one corporation or another to take it back to their employer. And then undercover work. It is Fun and draining. I started my career as a PI in February 2002, and in March 2002, I was on my first undercover assignment. I was working third shift in a warehouse. We were hired to find out if people were stealing product, selling drugs, or and sleeping or kind of misusing the time. Shift was from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. Didn't find any theft didn't find any selling of drugs, but people were coming to work drunk often. People were creating little spots in the warehouse to hide and sleep throughout the course of their shift. I had one guy who was smoking and pushing a propane tank to refill his tank on his forklift. So a lot of safety issues going on there. I know some of my other colleagues have worked some undercover cases, and it can be a lot because you're essentially working two jobs. You've got to investigate, but you also have to do the job you're hired to do. I got put on that case because of my experience at Home Depot. I knew how to drive forklifts. I knew the material in that warehouse. It was actually a company that Home Depot had worked with, in fact. It was basically preparing packages to be shipped out to those stores. So because of my understanding and knowledge of that, it made me a good candidate for that. Same thing in any undercover work. You don't want to necessarily go into something that you are not familiar with. It can damage your credibility, and it can make people not want to talk to you, which is what you need when you're working undercover. Your job is to find out information. Your job is to get that info and give it back to whoever's paying you. If you don't know what you're doing, you get ostracized, and you can't get in close with the people that you need to. Again, good source of tension, potential tension for your PI. Requirements to become a private investigator. There actually are some in some places. It's interesting. U.S. licensing can vary from, no license can be required. So there are some states where you don't have to have a license at all. You can just advertise and go do the job. Sometimes, well, most times at least, there is a city or state business license required, and that's it. You apply for the business license, you tell them what you're doing, and you're good to go. Some places require that you have years of investigative experience and licensing related training or testing. So in my case in Illinois, you had to get a license, you have to take a test. You have to have a certain number of hours of investigative experience. That kind of qualifies as the education and training piece. So once you have those two, you can then apply for your license and open up your business. You'll have to get an insurance, you have to find a place to advertise and all that fun stuff. But all of that can vary from state to state. And I say all that to say, depending on where your story is set, whatever state they're set in, check on the requirements for that particular state to make sure that you get it accurate. It's not going to be the same for everyone. You also want to check and see, let's say your PI has moved from one state to another. You want to check and see what those requirements are because they might not always transfer. All of this, again, could be a good potential source of tension. If you are a company or working for a company, you can work under that license. So for me, I did not have to have an individual license in Illinois. I had to have a certain card that said I'm eligible to work for those companies, but I would work under my employer's license. We had many offices throughout the Midwest. We had one in Florida, we had one in Georgia, one in Texas as well. Those states required that people actually have an individual license, right? So I had to test in those states to make sure that I could get my license. Yep. Yeah.
Do the licenses transfer like across state lines?
Not all the time.
So if you have there's no license required in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. If you go to Wyoming and they require a license, can you not operate there?
You can if your employer is based in the state you were hired in. So let's say you started working for Lowe's and their home state was Kentucky, but you needed to work a case in Wyoming. You could do that because the place that hired you is located in the state that you are working in primarily.
Okay.
So if they were based in Kentucky, they could not bring you from there to work there because you're not licensed to work there.
Right. So you can go out, but you can't come in.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. In some cases, an individual must have an individual license in order to work, in addition to that company having a license. Again, it gets very tricky and it's very state specific. So always, always, always check your requirements for the state that your PI is working in. They can be different. They can be more complicated. I know for us back then, my boss never wanted to work in California, never wanted to open in California. We worked cases in California, but the license requirements in this state were so complicated that he was just completely against it. It can be like that for certain states. So. Famous PIs in fiction. We all know these guys. Sherlock Holmes, Sam Spade. Sherlock Holmes is the epitome of the private investigator, right? Arguably the most famous of them all. Known for his deductive reasoning, his smart-ass attitude. What made him also more complicated was the fact that he was addicted to cocaine. Not many people even touch on that part. At least in those stories. He was experimenting, trying to open his mind up a little bit more. Sam Spade, king of the noir detectives. I say king, some people might have some other ideas. But these can typically be the two types of detectives that people think of when they're writing their stories. But there are others. Easy Rawlins, John Shaft, B.I. Warshawski, Miss Marple. I show all of these because I want it to be clear that your PI does not have to be the prototypical PI. Does not have to be the white male in the trench coat with the hat and the bad divorce. It can be any gender, it can be any race, it can be supernatural. Angel, the vampire with a soul, left Buffy and opened his own PI business in LA. Harry Dresden, gentleman, warlock, wizard, works out of Chicago, tackles supernatural cases. It can also be superheroes. Oftentimes when we think of Batman, we're thinking of Adam West and the Bat-Tusi or the Bat Shark Repellent. We have since moved on to the Christian Bale versions or the Michael Keaton versions, but at its core, Batman has been retconned into the world's greatest detective because of the things that he can do. Not just because he's got money to buy the gadgets, but because he actually thinks critically. There are more nuances to it. Jessica Jones, who I not heavily, but I did kind of base my character Cassidy Simmons on. She is troubled. She has superpowers. She's an alcoholic. Very much like my character. When I describe my books to people, my first book, especially Death's Legacy, I tell people it's a combination of Jessica Jones and Clash of the Titans. So if you like complex people with traumatic past that love bourbon, much like I do, this is the book for you, especially if you like magic, gods, monsters, all those things. Again, I say all those because it is important to remember that your characters can be PIs in very different genres, in every genre, quite frankly, and they don't have to match whatever that master mold is that people kind of think of when they think of this field. So how do we make our detective look, sound, and feel authentic? We have to get away from the Hollywood stuff, right? We have to get away from the car chases and the rich guys. A lot of PIs seem to be rich on TV. My base salary was $25,000. I got a lot of incentives, so I could make a good chunk of change in the course of the year. I got mileage reimbursed, all of those things. So by the end of the year, I could probably pull down 60 if I worked really hard, maybe 70. but I could never get that Ferrari. I'm still kind of upset about that. I did not have anyone fly me around in a helicopter. I did not have special gadgets to help me break into vaults. I did not carry lockpick tools, just kind of have them on my person at any given moment. Those types of things are fun, and they can be interesting on the story level, but it's not authentic. How do we avoid the repetition? How do we humanize these individuals in our pages? The key with any story that you're telling is the character, right? So the occupation is one thing, but the actual character is where you want to dig into. Now, you can use your character development and combine that with the occupation and make them even more complex. Maybe they hate the work. Maybe they are reluctant. They don't want to do it, but it's what they can do. That picture of Easy Rollins up there from Walter Mosley's book, Devil in a Blue Dress. In the first book, Easy did not want to be a PI. He wanted to find money to pay his mortgage. That was it. He got contracted to find somebody, and things kind of just took off from there. It's a very human need, right? We want to make sure that we are still realizing that our folks are human. So tap into those pieces a little bit more. But if there are going to be PIs, make sure you're adding some authenticity from that field to make it feel like they are actually doing the work. Talk about some of the tropes. You guys remember this movie? Anybody remember? Did anybody see this movie but me? The Last Boy Scout. It came out in the late 80s, I think. Late 80s, early 90s maybe. Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans. Between the two, who do you think the PI is? Yeah, right. Why? Because he's dressed all shabby, right? His character was a PI, former law enforcement, broken marriage, caught his wife cheating, daughter hates him, she used to cuss at him. She's like 14, cussing him out. Like one of those that you want to smack around, but you can't do that because, child services and all that. But he dresses like, in this movie, like he's just a slob. He sleeps in his car. He's unshaven. It's a very common trope that's used on screen especially, but it can be, you can see it sometimes in books. What are we seeing also in common? So disgraced alcoholic police detective goes private because he's still, quote unquote, got it. He's still got the skill, but he doesn't want to deal with the BS of the bureaucracy, right? He doesn't want to deal with the politics. Gets caught drinking on the job. He accidentally shoots somebody, causes a disgrace. He's gone, but now he's got to redeem himself, and he does that in the private sector. Can be a fun trope if you use it correctly, but we've seen it a lot. Second one, divorced dad. Still loves his wife. Good relationship with the child. A little bit of Bruce Willis in this. He still loved his wife, even though he caught her cheating, I think, with the lawyer. The lawyer that he used to work for, in fact. I think that was it. But it's common, right? He's broken. He's apart. He's not whole anymore. And so he's got to deal with that, but he's still got to make money. He's got to, the child's got a field trip coming up and they can't afford it, so he's got to make some money somehow. So he takes on cases. It can be, again, a fun trope to mess with, but it is nonetheless a trope. Divorced dad still loves his wife, but estranged from the child. Reluctant PI does it for himself or for someone he loves. He learns to love the job and demonstrates some skill at it. I don't want to do this, but my friend's kid is missing. I got to go find them. I'm going to go ask some questions because I know that neighborhood. I grew up there. All of a sudden now they find themselves knee deep in some nonsense and they're getting shot at every other week. They go find a gun from a guy that sells them out of his trunk in an alley around the corner to protect themselves, and he end up getting in a gunfight at the end, saves the child, and now, hey, I've got some aptitude for this. I'm going to be a PI. Cool. The anti-hero. This is the one who you're not sure. He's a PI, but you're not sure if he's doing it for good reasons. It's a PI who maybe goes out and he checks on those cheating spouses, but he's blackmailing them to make some money for himself. But then all of a sudden, this case comes across his desk, and he's like, ooh, this is interesting. No, I don't do that kind of work. And all of a sudden, things keep happening that keep pulling him back to that case, and all of a sudden, now he's working that case. But he's using his dark skills to make sure that he can get the job done the way it needs to be done. That, I think, is a more fun trope for me, because it deals with the morals, the morality of an individual. Great character development can be done in that type of story. Retired military, by the book, kind of robotic, learns to love people through his work. A little bit of Jack Reacher. If you've seen the story, if you've read the books, you know that Jack is very rigid in the way that he does things. There's a black and a white, and sometimes there's a little gray in the middle, but there is a right way to do things. He's kind of off-putting because he's so large and so stoic, and it's hard for people to connect with him. But eventually, and through the work, he learns how to connect with people and make that either through love or through friendship or something. And then we've got the cop that realizes there's just no justice in the system, and then he goes private. Classic scene in Shaft, the remake, the one with Samuel L. Jackson, where he takes his badge and he throws it at the judge, and it just misses the judge and hits the wall behind him. I don't know how he didn't get arrested for attempted assault, but those things happen. All of these are tropes. All of these are tried and true tropes. They've been done before. Does not mean you can't use them again, but you need to know them to make sure that you can use them correctly. Knowing the tropes and also knowing the work can help make these tropes not feel tropey. That makes sense. So let's talk about the prep work. As I drink water.
Do we have any questions at this point since he's drinking water? Online, anybody have any questions? Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to introduce maybe the new modern PI or a version of it, because it's true in my case, and I used to own a research agency, by the way, called Infinite Information. But currently I'm writing 2 real-life exposés. Okay. And one is about a very large retail store, and the other is something that's more local. And so I'm just going to say the whistleblower, which isn't PI per se. We don't necessarily make a living as a PI. But it's scary and it's nerky because you're not, quote, undercover. Yeah. And at the end of the day. But I just wanted to put that out there because there may be some other whistleblower writers. Sure. Watching.
But in some respects, you are undercover because you're trying to find things out without people knowing, right? And that's where the nerve-wracking part comes in. Yeah. When I say PI, but it's essentially any type of investigator. It can be an investigative journalist. It can be someone who's researching something for a paper they're writing in school. All of those things can lead to you kind of digging and having to do some of the things that PIs would normally do. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a licensed individual in order to do this. It could be somebody that is just kind of trying to find some information out, maybe to be a whistleblower, maybe for their own knowledge and information about something that they are close to. I've known a few writers that have worked on family history, and they start doing some digging and research, and they go to towns where their grandparents or great-grandparents are born, and they unearth some ungodly things that were kept secret for a reason. That is an investigator. And you're doing a lot of the things that you would do as a private investigator. All right, so some of the essentials. When working cases, every PI should have at least these items. A vehicle. in good working condition. Seems simple, right? Sometimes it's not. There were a number of individuals that came to try to work for us, and their car was not working all the time. Or their car was very conspicuous. I had a guy once that pulled up for an interview, and he had a bright yellow, with those cube things. I think it was a Honda Element. It was yellow and black. He pulled in, he came in the building, and he says, "I'm here for my interview." And I looked out at his car, and I'm like, "Please tell me that's not your car, because it's going to affect your job. It's going to affect your ability to get hired. Tell me that's like your mom's car, or your dad's car, or your brother's, or something." He's like, "No, I just bought that." I'm like, okay, come on in, have a seat in the conference room. Somebody will be right with you. Of course, he did not get hired. Not just because of the car. There were other issues, but your car should blend in. It should work. It should have gas in it, and it should blend in. When I started working, the car that I started working with was a black Volkswagen Jetta. Everybody had those. I shifted later, about a year later, I got myself a Ford Explorer. It was like a 92 Ford Explorer. The first year I had it, it ran. The next year it did not, and so I had to get a new car. But again, in looking for those cars, you got to make sure that it's not something that you want because it looks flashy, it looks fancy. You have to make sure that it's something that blends in with traffic. The less you stick out, the better. Make sure you have a phone that is charged and a car charger. I went out on a case once. So we were based in the Chicago area. We worked in a town called Westchester, which is just west of the city. A lot of the cases that we got, though, were in very rural areas of Illinois. It was not uncommon for me to have to leave at 4 a.m. to make sure I could be down in Champaign or Peoria, by 6 o'clock. I once went on a case. I was at the very western edge of Illinois. I had my personal phone and I had a work phone. Somehow, I left the house without either of them. Yeah. So I couldn't call back to the office to have them run plates for me. I could not call the office to have them check and give me a list of the neighbors that were in the area because I didn't have that in the file for some reason. The craziest thing was I could not call the office to check in and make sure that they knew I was alive. Because when I got back to the office, my boss was angry. I had asked him for Cubs tickets prior to that. He came down and he threw them at me and he says, "Here's your damn tickets." I said, "Okay, I'm so sorry." And he just walked away. And everybody else told me he thought I was dead. He was that concerned. He's concerned about all his people. So if you're working with others, you have to make sure you've got a phone that is charged, that is ready to go. The other piece is you have to make sure that you can get out of things safely. Without a phone, I would not have been able to call police if I got into trouble. I wouldn't have been able to call anyone if I got into trouble. So it is a safety issue as much as it is an investigative tool. Make sure that you've got it on you. Make sure you have a camera. Now, the great thing about phones now is they have cameras on them. So we kind of got that for still shots, even for video. We used video recorders, little handy cams, and I think a lot of PIs still use those. You have to make sure you got it, make sure it's charged, make sure you have plenty of tapes. If it's digital, cool. That's even better. Just make sure that it is charged and ready to go. Make sure you've got an audio recorder, a notepad, and pens. Audio recorder is essential, and again, we've got those on our phones now, so that's a good thing. But if you have to make note of something really quickly while you're driving, you can't pull over and write it down. You've got to make sure you've got something to speak into. Notepads and pens are obvious. During the course of an investigation, you could be sitting in your car for hours and hours and hours and nothing's happening. But you still have to notate the things that are happening in that area. So if I'm watching a house that's maybe a half a block down, I'm trying to watch everything that goes on in that house. I want to know when the mail gets delivered. I need to know what day the garbage gets picked up. I need to know who visits that house. I need to know when people come and go. And I need to notate each and every time that happens. Every time I drive by it to check and see if there's something new happening around there, I need to be able to notate that. If I'm driving around the back of the house, either through the alley or from the other side of the street, or if I'm walking by, I need to make sure I can get back to my car and then write that stuff down. Notes are essential. So always make sure you've got a pen and pad on you. The extras: cash, credit card, extra clothes, snacks, as funny as it sounds, music. I developed a very close relationship with Eminem and Brian McKnight while working my cases. Listen to them all the time. Find your favorite radio station. Some cars have satellite. I know when satellite came on board, every PI got one for Christmas. I swear to God, everyone had one. And that was back in the days where you could like detach it from your car. You had to put the antenna on the outside. Like you had to do all the hard work. Now it's all built in. Well, back in the Stone Ages, you had to plug it in, make sure it was charged and ready to go. Cash. How many people still carry cash here?
Some cash.
I don't. I very rarely have cash. Last time I had cash is because somebody bought a book from me. And I just happened, they had cash on me, and cool, that's fine. I had that cash in my wallet for 6 months. Didn't even realize I had it because I just don't carry it anymore. But you need it. Have cash, have change. Toll roads. Not as big here, but in some states you have to have money for toll roads. Credit card, because you never know, right? I had to follow somebody into a restaurant to make sure that I could at least film who they were with. And if I'd gone in there and bought something, I wouldn't have had enough cash. I had like $10 on me at the time. Credit card helped because that meal was expensive, but it was good. Of course, I built a client for that later on. Extra clothes, because sometimes you never know. One of my colleagues followed somebody from Joliet, Illinois, all the way to Virginia. Didn't mean to. Thought it was just going to be a normal day, and it was not. Things like that only get authorized by clients. It's not an everyday thing. But if you've got a client that says, hey, I need you to follow them wherever they go, no matter where it takes you, you've got to make sure that you're able to go. So you definitely need cash there, a credit card, but have a change of clothes. You never know how long an investigation is going to take. So if I start a surveillance at 6 a.m. and I'm in Peoria and I finish it up at 4, I'm not driving back to Chicago just to come back the next day. Have a change of clothes in the car, get your credit card out, go get a hotel room, be ready to go again the next morning. I did also have an instance where, this is awful. Right over the border is the great state of Indiana, and Indiana has these dunes, these large sand dunes. I followed someone who, for some reason, wanted to go to the dunes. And for some ungodly reason, he decided to walk the dunes. And they're very tall, and it's all sand, and I'm wearing jeans and gym shoes. And by the time I got to the top, I'm surprised I'm still standing here now. My heart was beating fast. I was drenched in sweat. I was just not ready for that experience at all. Fortunately, I had a change of clothes in the car so I could get out of the sweaty stuff and put something new on. Those types of things can happen. Keep a set of gym clothes in the car. Maybe somebody has that bad back or that bad leg, but they're going to the gym every morning. Go in with them. A lot of gyms give you day passes, especially YMCAs. They'll give you a day pass to check the place out, see if you want to be a part of it. You can do that if your suspect is going into the gym to work out. Take your camera in there, put it in your bag, film him or her working out for hours and hours, and call it a day. So always have those things in there. Snacks are obvious. You will get hungry. You won't be able to leave. The tricky thing is the water. It's the liquid. It is being on surveillance for 8 hours, 10 hours, and not being able to go to the bathroom. For men, you can get away with some things, except when you're in a residential neighborhood or near a park. So you have to get very, very, be very cautious when you're drinking a lot of liquids, because it's going to be hard to get rid of that. Your bladder will get trained to hold things for a while. I can go up to 10 hours still without going to the bathroom. It's not comfortable, but it can happen. Also a good source of tension in your stories. Last thing you want to make sure you have is the actual file itself. So your file should contain all the subject's information. Their name, hopefully a photo, addresses, vehicles, list of their property, criminal and civil records, any family information, any work information. All of those things are essential because they can help you kind of build an idea of who your person is. One of the things that we also did, because we worked a lot of workers' compensation cases, we got those records as well. We'd go down to the office, we'd put that person's name in, and we'd find out if they filed work comp cases in the past and how many, and also get the disposition of that. We did that for a couple reasons. One, for our general knowledge, but also to know if there was a pattern of this. Does this person go to jobs, get hurt, and collect money all the time? If that's the case, that's good information for an employer to have. Kind of helps mitigate how much they might get paid out later on. Property searches, those are public record. You can find those things out. Why do you want that? Because you're going to go to a main property, but what if they're not there? Well, if they have a cabin somewhere, or if they have another apartment or house somewhere, you want to know that so you can check those places out as well. Criminal and civil records can be crucial, especially the criminal records, because you want to know if this individual has a propensity for violence. Because if you get caught and they get upset, you can imagine what can potentially happen. I had a case once. Actually, I wasn't even working the case. I had called in sick. I was home, and I lived at the time on the south side of the city, south side of Chicago. This case was happening right over the border in Indiana, East Chicago. And my boss called me and said, "Hey, I know you're sick. I just wonder if you could just run by this place real quick." And I said, "Yeah, fine. Like, I'm kind of bored here. I got to get out. I got to go to Walgreens anyway. I'll go run by." So I go by this apartment complex, and I see the claimant's van in the driveway. And I call my boss and say, "Hey, he's here. I said, I can stick it out for a little bit if you want." And he's like, "Yeah, that'd be great." This guy happened to be from Minnesota. So our Minnesota investigator was running his records, and they were going to get them back to us. During that time, the guy comes out with a buddy of his. They get in the van, they go run a couple errands, and they come right back. I followed them there, followed them back, got a little video. Cool. Confirm it was definitely him. About an hour later, I get a call saying, "Hey, we got the records from this guy. You might want to leave." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, because he's got 15 arrests. 14 of them involve a deadly weapon, handgun." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Oh, wait, he's leaving right now." I said, "I'll take it, see where he goes. If it looks bad, I'll get out." So the guy leaves, starts driving down this street, and I'm behind him, and all of a sudden he stops in the middle of the street. And then he turns a little bit to block the street. And then he gets out of his car and slowly walks to me. His buddy gets out of the passenger side, and they both start to flank me. I had a map open on my passenger side, and I covered my camera and all that stuff up with the map. And he walks up to me. I'm like, I said, what's going on? He's like, "I just want to know one thing, man." Like, "Why are you following me?" And I said, "I'm not following you." And I looked over my map. I said, "I'm trying to find this street here, but I'm lost. I'm not from here. Can you help me find it?" And his buddy goes, "Yo, dude, he's lying." And then I see our claimant put his hands, he had a hoodie on, but he went under the hoodie and starts reaching for something. And I'm like, okay, I'm out. So I skirted around his buddy onto someone's lawn, couple lawns to get around their car, and then I took off and I went home. I called my boss. I said, next time I'm sick, don't ask me to do anything ever again. Having that information beforehand would have been great, because I probably would have been a little more cautious in what I was doing. We all would have been a little more cautious. But the more information you have about your claimant, your subject, the better. That is a crucial aspect of the job, and something that your investigator in your story should be worried about. I saw a lot of you tense up as I was telling that story. Imagine how tense your character can be in the story if that were to happen. All of these things that I'm telling, all the things that go into this work, if done incorrectly or not done at all, are great areas of tension, great ways to build conflict in your story, and great ways to build inner conflict in your investigator as well. So explore those things, but having the knowledge of what to explore is going to be crucial. Any questions about things that you should have or not have, things that maybe you've heard you should have or not have?
Any questions? Here comes Greg. All of you online, if you have questions, either raise your hand on your list there or put it in the chat.
Now, all these things that you talk about are related to time, time that it's occurring. Like the detectives, if you're writing a detective story back in the 40s, they, of course, don't have cell phones. They don't have a lot of this other stuff. So some of these items, I would take it, would be more difficult to acquire based on the time that your story takes place, or if it takes place today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you are writing a story that takes place pre-cell phone, when I first started, the first cell phone I had was this large brick that had the battery, the charger that was like a U-shaped and hooked onto the bottom. Like things were just getting going then. Before that, though, like my boss would tell stories about going out. He didn't have a phone. We had phone cards too, because if payphone was still around, so if your phone did run a charge, you'd have a phone card. You could call somebody from payphone. He also went out, in the 70s and 80s with these large video cameras, the big shoulder mounts, which aren't very inconspicuous. So the time period does matter. You're absolutely right. And I think the tension in stories that take place in those times are even greater because of those things that you don't have. You've got to get more creative with things. We're going to talk about something shortly that I think is a great tool for PIs to use in any decade. It's the one thing that I think gets you the best information ever. Talk about that shortly. Best ways to get your intelligence: record search, criminal, civil, property. Knowing that information, again, can kind of set the tone for the day and set the tone for what you're going to do with that particular investigation. Children, great source of information. Why? Because they love to talk. They love to tell stories. They get energetic about things. You have to be very careful with that, though. You can't just be someone walking up and talking to a kid in a park. Okay? But they do love to talk to adults and show off how smart they are, or to show off a new skill they have, even if it's like a half a cartwheel. They will tell you things that they should not tell you. That makes them great sources of info. Older adults love sharing stories and history. My mother's a gold mine. I can't tell her anything. I try not to. I be very careful what I tell her, because she will tell everybody. She is the historian of the family, and she loves telling stories. Like my birthday was just a few weeks back, and she loves telling the story the day that I was born. Things that she was doing, how long the labor was, and all these things. But older adults do love sitting down with people, because it's not that often that they get to share what they know. You get people talking, and they will continue to talk. especially if you're nice to them. Foreign adults. I say this because things get lost in translation a lot. Folks in which English is not their primary language or not their first language, they tend to overshare because they don't know what they should share, what they shouldn't share. They also do love talking to folks as well. And trash. Unless the trash is planted, trash never lies. If you're having trouble finding somebody in your store, if your PI is having trouble, have them do a trash pull. That means that they go up on the day that trash is being picked up and they grab a bag or 2 bags. Make sure they grab the bags, not the loose stuff that's in there. And then they go find some secluded spot and they go through it. Receipts are in there. Old letters, old documents, bills. Maybe you don't have a phone number for them, and all of a sudden they didn't shred their phone bill. They just kind of ripped it. Now you've got a phone number for them, or you've got a phone number that you didn't have before. There's a lot of information. There can be a wealth of information in those bags. It's a dirty job. It's the dirtiest of them, but there can be a lot of information gained through that. That is a little harder in some cases now because of shredders. People do shred instead of just tearing up. I remember, back in the day, we would take some trash out. We'd find all these pieces of paper. We'd bring it back to the office. We'd order pizza, and we'd have a puzzle party. And we would just start putting things together to figure out exactly what we needed to figure out. Utilize that. Again, that story that I told you about at the beginning where I saw their character go and pull garbage, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That had me wanting to read more because I know that's an actual thing that happens. This is the fun one, the pretext. Pretext is a way to get information by lying. That's the basics of it. It's an excuse to do something or say something that's not accurate. Pretext may be based on a half-truth or developed in the context of misleading fabrication. It's used to conceal the true purpose or rationale behind the actions and the words. So again, you're trying to get information from somebody, but you are misrepresenting yourself in order to get that information. Case in point, I get a call from a client. They want us to find somebody. He's got a work comp issue. They're still paying him. They've heard through the grapevine that he's working for his brother's moving company. But they don't know where he lives. The last known address doesn't seem to be accurate. So I go to the last known address, and I find out who's living there, but I need to find out about this guy without letting the people that live there know what I'm looking for. So I thumbed through the newspaper, and at that time, there was a guy that was wanted for bigamy and embezzlement. He was married to 2 women, stealing from his company, and he took off. All this was in Chicago. So I'm like, okay, I'll use this. I go knock on the door. There's a woman and her boyfriend who were living there, and it was a trailer park. I asked them about the guy in the newspaper. Told them I was a PI. I didn't lie about that, but I said I'm looking for this guy. And they're like, no, I haven't seen him. I said, are you sure? Because I've heard rumors that he frequents this place. He hangs out in this town. It was a very small town in central Illinois. And I'm like, no, we haven't seen him. And the boyfriend says, you know what? Maybe I have. Hold on. They invite me in. He pulls out this photo album, starts going through it. It's like, oh, I thought it was this guy, but it's not. So we get to talking about this particular case, completely unrelated to the one I'm there for. The woman brings up that they had a roommate that lived with them. The roommate is the guy I'm looking for. And I said, do you think he might know? And then we spend the next 20 minutes talking about that guy. They give me information. They tell me who he's living with. They tell me where he's working. I now have a phone number for him because I'm going to call him to see if he's got this guy in the number in his memory. See if he's seen this guy in the area. Got all this information. I go to one of the addresses that they give me. Sure enough, there's my guy. Now I'm able to follow him for the rest of that investigation. I've got his home now. I know where he's working. He is actually working for his brother's moving company. I get him on film, throwing things into a truck. I get him unloading a rolled up rug, a very large rug, throwing it on his shoulder, which he shouldn't be able to do, throwing it over his head into a dumpster, which he shouldn't be able to do. Gold mine. Clients loving it. Gives me another 3 extra days to work this case. Great stuff. But all that happened because of the pretext. I lied about the very reason I was really there, was able to shift the tone of that conversation to get the information that I needed. That is a crucial element with your investigators. It's a great thing to use no matter what decade you're in. 30s, 40s, 1850s, whatever. It is crucial, though, that your PI, if you're going to use this pretext, that whatever lie you're telling, that they're comfortable with it, right? So it's kind of like undercover work. You should try to go into undercover work that you are familiar with as much as possible. One of the common pretexts I would use was that I was a recruiter for Home Depot. Had a lot of people that were in construction, electrical work, all these things. And any of the folks that I followed pretty much would have been great employees at Home Depot if they weren't, lying and trying to steal from their employer. But being a recruiter came in handy because I could call them up and I could ask them a series of questions as a recruiter. Say, hey, I got your name and number from somebody, said you might be looking for work. I'm a recruiter for Home Depot. You got some time to answer some questions for me? Most times they did. I could also use that face-to-face with somebody. But I would use that because I spent 6 years working at Home Depot. I was in sales. I was a manager. I knew all the ins and outs of the organization. I knew how it worked. I was very comfortable talking about the nature of it. So if you are going to have your PI or whoever your investigator is use a pretext, try to make sure they're using something that is rooted in something that they are comfortable with, because as George Costanza said, it's not a lie if you believe it. If you're a Seinfeld fan, you know what that means. It is easier to misrepresent something when you actually know what you're talking about in that misrepresentation. You sound authentic, you sound natural, doesn't sound like you're stuttering about anything. Any questions about the pretext? Yeah.
Anyone online, anyone on Zoom have a question for Dennis? Now's a great opportunity. Unmute and ask your question. I'm not seeing anybody. You were just doing such a great job. They don't have any questions. Anybody in the room have questions? Okay.
All right. Areas for conflict. We've been talking about this throughout, right? So the part of this presentation that I enjoy the most is just sharing the information, but also making sure that you realize that these are also sources of tension and conflict for your stories. Anything, like I said earlier, that is done correctly or incorrectly can be a source of tension that you can build upon. Internal areas. Impatience. PIs are very impatient, even though they should not be. I am a Taurus. I am one of the most impatient people you'll ever meet, but people don't know that. Outside, they see me as very patient. Not only have I worked retail sales, I worked PI work, and I work in social service. I have no choice but to be patient. But inside, I'm a volcano ready to explode sometimes. Great source of internal conflict. You can totally destroy a case by moving too quickly into something. You get to something, you get to a house at like 9 o'clock, you're sitting there watching, nothing happens for an hour, you get bored, you want to know if that person's even in the house. Maybe you're sitting there for no reason. Patience, a good PI will wait several hours first before something happens, or before they start knocking on doors or making phone calls. An impatient PI will go ahead and start making those calls almost as soon as they arrive, or start knocking on doors. that can completely scare away your claimant. Now they've seen your face. It's going to be harder to even follow them because they're going to see your face. Maybe they've watched you walk back to your car. All of these can be potential issues. Making assumptions. We all do it. It can be a dangerous thing in this job. Dangerous to your safety, but also dangerous for the case itself. It can completely explode the whole thing. Arrogance. Thinking that you are so good that no one knows who you are, no one's on to you, no one sees you following them, no one's calling their neighbors, say, who's that strange guy out there on the car? Arrogance can definitely get you in trouble. First time I had a good string. So after I did 3 months undercover, and then I get back on the street, and I was riding high. Like that case went pretty well. So I was like the flavor of the month for a while. And I had a string of good cases after that. And so I thought I could do anything, including follow somebody by being in front of them. It's a very cocky thing to do. Now, it can be done, and I've done it successfully after that. But that first time, I'm like, no problem. I got this. I know exactly where he's going. I made assumptions about where he was going. I was wrong. I was so wrong. My arrogance got me in trouble. I lost a guy. Pissed off the client. Lost that case. It got reassigned to somebody else. Fear. Fear can be a challenge. Big time. Gender can be a challenge at times. As a male, large male especially, when I go and talk to people that are smaller than me or that can be potentially intimidated by my size, it becomes very difficult for them to open up to me. So I have to be very careful about how I speak to them in those instances. Same can be true of any investigator in a story. If their personality is such that they are intimidating to women, it can be a potential source of conflict. Race can be a big source of conflict. I was the only black investigator in my company for a while. We hired a few others after that, but none lasted as long as I did. In central Illinois, there are very few towns that have multiple ethnicities in them. I cannot tell you the number of towns that I went to in which I was the only black person in that town. And so when I cross into that town, people know. When I'm parked on the side of the street, looking down at somebody's house, people know. When I'm in a farm town and I'm parked on the side of the road trying to film this farmer doing work in his field, people know. It can be a challenge. And again, a great source of conflict and tension in your story. It's not comfortable. The work can be done. Obviously, it can be done. I got the job done. But it's a challenge. And the same was true working in the city. Working on the west side of Chicago or the south side of Chicago, that's predominantly black or predominantly black and Latino. My colleagues couldn't work there comfortably. Everybody assumes they're a cop. And so things start to shut down. They got the work done, of course, but it can be a challenge. So it works in all ways. External areas for conflict. Poor preparation. So again, don't have your gas filled, phone's not charged, camera's not ready to go, don't have a camera, don't have a phone, don't have information about the claimant. Like you don't know anything about them at all. All of those things can be a problem. Nosy neighbors. Nosy neighbors are a problem. They, especially post 9/11, working cases was hard. I worked one in a few blocks away from Midway Airport once, and I was about a block away, literally a block away from the house I was watching. I saw this woman right outside my car looking out her window at me multiple times. The last time I saw her, she was on her phone. And I said, okay, it's going to be a problem. So I moved my car. So my claimant's house is here. I'm back here. I move my car. I park on the same block, but ahead of the house so that I can look through the mirror back at the house to see what's going on. 10 minutes after that, 5 squad cars pull up. 5 for little old me. I got one pulled up next to me with 3 officers in it, plain clothes. I got one behind him, and then I got 3 blocking the intersection. I rolled my window down and I said, "Hey, been waiting on you guys. Didn't think you'd come this deep." And the look of confusion was interesting. He says, "What do you mean you've been waiting on us?" I said, "Yeah, I was parked down the street before and I saw a woman call, figured she's calling the police, but this is a little excessive." He's like, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm a PI working a comp case." And the 3 in that car started laughing hard. They get on the radio, tell all the other guys, and all I see is these hands go, "Ah!" The 3 peel off, the one behind them peels off, and they're like, "Oh my God." It's like in small towns, I told you this before, small towns you go, you tell the police that you're in town working a case, so if they do get a call, they don't come out, right? You can do that in a small town. You can't do that in Chicago. They don't care. They're going to come out anyway, right? So we started talking a bit, and they're like, "Did we blow your cover?" I'm like, "No, I moved from the house. I can still see." He goes, "You need us to get him out of the house? Like, is it dangerous? You want us to go in there and bring him out?" I'm like, "Nah, please don't do that." I said, "It's fine. I got all day. I'm good to go." But nosy neighbors start that. Nosy neighbors that start walking by cars. Nosy neighbors that see you driving by a lot. They have no problem calling the police again, especially post 9/11. They will get in your business, especially if they're trying to protect their neighborhood or see themselves as a neighborhood protector. Police can be an issue, obviously. Weather can be an issue. Too hot, too cold, rainy, in the Midwest and East Coast, if it's snowing, all those can be potential issues. Working here today, if it's going to be 98, would be hell. When I pulled in, I saw a lot of people beelining it for that row of trees so they could park their cars there. I know that trick. That's what we do. We go out, work a case, we're trying to find a shade tree. Because if it's July in Chicago, when it's 104, because, it's 95, but with the heat index, it's going to feel like, blah, blah, blah. It's hot. It's 104 as far as I'm concerned. You got to find something that's going to at least try to protect you. So weather can be an issue. When it's the dead of winter and it's freezing in your car, you got to keep turning it on, keep turning it off, turn it on. Those all can be issues for your case. The location, like I said, it's working small towns, working large towns, those would be problems. Biology, having to go to the bathroom, falling asleep because you've been up for so long. All of those can be potential areas of conflict for your stories. Quick do's and don'ts. Do not carry a badge. PIs do not carry badges. They make them. There's actually a place where you can order a little silver badge that says Private Investigator or Private Detective, but you don't wear those. You don't flash those because people automatically assume that you're police, and now you're misrepresenting yourself. You're not doing it on purpose, but they make the assumption. And if it comes back on you later, people are going to say, "You pretended to be a cop to get this information. We can't use this. We can't use this." You do want to carry ID, right? So if you are a PI, make sure you've got your ID with your license number on it, with your name, contact info, all that stuff. Even if it's just a business card, that can help. Guns, it's your choice. If you want your investigator to carry a gun, go for it. But wherever that place is, wherever they're set, make sure you check the state laws for carrying. You want to consider liability issues. The reason we did not carry guns is because it was a huge liability issue. You start waving that thing around, the thing goes off, you shoot somebody to try to protect yourself, well, now the company's in trouble. Again, great source of conflict for your scene or for your story. Advertising, your choice. A lot of companies will advertise. You'll see them, online. They'll have some type of website. The company I worked for did not. We worked in a little office space, and the sign outside was not even for us. It was for the municipal building across the street. Depends on what you want to do. You see movies, you see PIs, they've got offices. They've got their name on the office, they've got their license number on there. Sometimes that's just enough. They get hired through word of mouth. Again, it's your choice as to how you want to do it. But definitely don't carry the badge. Please don't carry the badge. Begging you. I did have a guy that he wanted to come on board. He was in the training phase, and we used to rotate new investigators. So they'd work with an investigator every week so they could see how people did it, different ways you can do the job. And then through that, you kind of learn your own way to do it. This guy gets in my car. It was his second week. And he pulled this badge out. I said, "What's that?" He says, "I got my badge. I can put my work ID in it. It's my badge." I'm like, "No." You pull that out at any point when we're working together this week, I will make sure that you are fired. Nobody carries a badge. And I went through all the reasons why we didn't. And he was dejected because he wanted that badge. So he wanted to be able to flash that thing so bad. By the third week, he was gone for a lot of other reasons, but that badge certainly did not help. And that's the end. Any questions?
If you have a question for Dennis, go to the mic.
Okay, I got another question. Mm-hmm. I'm currently writing a story that involves a common guy. He gets robbed on a commuter train.
Okay.
His best friend is a bail bondsman.
Okay.
In fact, he did a favor for this guy back in college. They go to try to retrieve this guy's stuff, find out that it's been given away to somebody else that has some international implications.
I like it.
So they've got the bail bondsman now calls a friend of his who's FBI, and because it's an international issue at this point, the FBI guy calls a friend that he met in the Secret Service, both of them in the same town. So now they're trying to figure out, where do we go from here to investigate what these guys are really up to, mm-hmm. and somehow make sense of all this nonsense. So are there any implications in working from bail bondsman, FBI, Secret Service that, should come into play?
So first of all, I love that premise. As long as they get along, you're good. There could be issues from admin, right? So talked earlier about, there are some agencies, some departments that do not want private citizens or PIs, private investigators, anyone from the private sector working cases, especially something with international implications. So you could potentially see some conflict come from that FBI agent's or that Secret Service agent's boss, whoever the special agent in charge is at that time. That could be a good source of conflict. If those other individuals work closely together and they don't mind working together, that's great, because now it's them against this international whatever it is, plus trying not to let the bosses know what they're doing. There's a fun aspect of private investigation that can sometimes get overlooked, and that is they're not bound by the laws that people that wear a badge are. There are certain things that you can kind of get away with. Some things you should not do, but you do because you are a PI. But there are places that they can go that, somebody wearing a suit and tie can't necessarily do. So that combination, that partnership could be very crucial, because now you've got your Secret Service and your FBI sending your bail bondsman and your private citizen in to check out something that they can't check out, and then they kind of share that information. So I think the only point, like I said, as long as they get along, the only point of conflict could be administrators, and then whatever conflict is going to arise from working with those international folks. Sure.
I have a few quick questions.
Okay.
I'll state them first, and then I'll sit down. You can answer. Thank you. Were you ever retaliated against? And have you written, or would you write a book about your escapades as a PI, sort of a nonfiction book? And did you bring your book for sale with the lady PI?
Last question, yes, I do have some copies with me. Retaliated against, not retaliated against. Someone did catch on to me that I was following them and decided to take me on a little journey. And I stopped where I was while he went off and did his thing. And then like 2 minutes later, a police officer came down, like quickly. I didn't realize that the lot that the guy pulled in was the police department. Cop comes down, tells me someone's reported me for following them, wants to know what I'm doing. I have this conversation with the guy. He's like, okay, you know, they're going to run your credentials. They're going to run your license anyway just to make sure you don't have any warrants. So he starts running that. As he's doing that, the guy I'm following comes speeding down and demands that I get arrested. And the cop tells him, shouldn't have told him, but told him, the guy's a private investigator. You've probably done something wrong. He's just doing his job. I'm not going to arrest him. And the guy gets pissed. He's like angry, and it didn't get physical, but he was just doing a lot of yelling. So that was like the closest retaliation I got. Otherwise, there was nothing there. And then the second question, I would not write a book about, I'm a fiction person. I'll use some elements, you know, of my experiences. So like the thing that I talked about where the best place to get information from, the mystery novel that I write, my character uses those very same elements. So things that I did, techniques, will definitely make it in the book, but the actual cases, I'm not a memoirist, so I wouldn't do that. Yeah. Any more questions online before I slink away? Yeah.
So I have a question when it comes to payment.
Sure.
Because you mentioned that, especially like domestic cases, right? If they're unhappy with, you know, you didn't find anything, that they just don't pay you. Is there ever a sort of contract where, you know, I'll take this case, but you have to pay half up front, or it's like, you know, you sign this and it doesn't matter what I find, like, you have to pay me the required. Is basically how does that work? Is it different every single case you take?
So ultimately, you're going to have a contract between you and the whoever's hiring you to do the work, right? You sign something, say you're hiring me to do this. This is the rate. If you agree to this, sign the bottom. You're going to be billed afterward, and if they don't pay you, you can take them to court. In those instances, we changed the basis of the way that we started doing domestic cases, and I think most investigators do that just kind of across the board anyway, where we started taking half the payment up front as a retainer, and we would ask for all the information that we needed, photographs, whatever. We would take that and we would say, don't call us until we call you. Because another issue was always calling like every half hour looking for updates. He just left the house. Can you follow him? I'm like, no, I'm working another case right now. I can't follow him. You know, those types of things. So the nature of the payment was changed for that type of case in particular. But for the most part, there usually is a contract. There's an understanding about how the payment is going to work, and that those things are signed off on. Some smaller companies, you know, if it's just you, a lot of folks will take half the payment up front because it's going to help cover upfront expenses. So it'll help cover, you know, the gas expenses, if there's any copies of things that need to be made. Like if I'm going to the courthouse and running records, and if I'm making copies of that, I might have to pay for some of those things. If you're following somebody and they go into a store or go to a restaurant and you need to check and see what's going on, you're going to go in with them. You want to make sure you've got payment so you can kind of cover the expenses that happen with that. So that's the reason why you would take like at least half up front, and then you can pay the rest of it later. So there will be contracts. It just kind of depends on the company.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else?
When did you decide and why did you decide to leave that work and get into social work?
So I got to a point where I wanted more. I got a little bored with the surveillance part. Like, it was the first 2-3 years I could not get enough of it. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I'd get up extra early to start something just to make sure I was there on time, or might catch something. I'd stay longer and not even bill for the longer time I was there because I just loved the job so much. And after a while, it became I got a little burnt out, and I left the field. I came inside and started doing some internal stuff. So I was more like doing backgrounds and things of that nature, helping other investigators with things that they needed. And that was fun for a while too, but I still needed more to do. So I started, I applied for my master's degree, a master's program, because my goal was to learn more about people and then eventually move and specialize in something. I wanted to specialize in deception detection. So that is like learning how to polygraph, learning about microexpressions, so those little nervous tics that can tell you that somebody's being deceptive. Statement analysis, if someone actually writes something out and you read it, you can tell at which point they are being deceptive. And you can use that to help kind of guide your questioning. So I wanted to specialize in all of those things, and that's why I went to school. At some point, I decided that I wanted to also get some experience in mental health because of what I was studying. For instance, psychology, the psychology courses were great, and I could kind of, utilize them in my work, but there were some aspects of it that I needed like some real firsthand experience on. So I took a little leave from being an investigator, took about 6 months off, applied for jobs in mental health, eventually got one. And once I got into it, I decided I liked it better. It was a little bit more challenging, in some aspects a little bit more rewarding. It can still burn you out. There's just a lot to working with folks that have mental health and addiction challenges. But yeah, once I got into it, it was just hard to get out. I did go back every once in a while. They'd call me up and say, hey, I need help on this, or I need help on that. And, if I had some time, I would certainly go and help out with some things. But yeah, I didn't look back on it. I get bored easily too sometimes, so that's why I write in different genres.
Any more questions? Anyone?
There is one on Zoom, really quick, Michelle.
Oh, yeah. No, we asked for Zoom. Go ahead.
Yep. James just posted a quick question. He said, "Great presentation. I have several ideas for my story. Could you quickly comment on your path to publishing and what the market is like for your genre? Thank you."
I can. So I am not traditionally published. That is a path, obviously. I'm also not entirely indie published. I work with Acorn Publishing, which is a hybrid publisher. They will, all the work that you would normally do, all the money that you'd pay to indie publish, I pay them. They help me with those things, and then I publish my book. They do not take any of my royalties. They do not ask for anything else other than that I have a great career. I'm able to publish under their imprint. I use their people to help format my books. They help me with my cover designs. They help me with editing. They help me learn how to market as well. They give me the good tips and tricks that can be successful in marketing. All of that information has helped me get my name out there and get me to places like this where I come and do presentations, or get me on panels at Comic-Con and WonderCon, get me invited to do anthologies and things of that nature, because of the groundwork that they laid and because of the way that I was able to market myself, market my books, and have a book that looks indistinguishable from any traditional published book. So that was the path that I decided to take, and mostly because I got tired of the query process. I did query for a while with my first book. I wasn't getting any bites. But I also was not comfortable doing everything myself. I needed somebody that could help me, and somebody that was that knew the business. So the founders of Acorn, they are traditionally published authors. They have that experience, so they know what the publishing world is like. They also know that it is difficult sometimes for young authors or authors just coming up. And so they created this company to provide that for them. Some people will think that this place is a vanity press, and it is not. They do not just publish any book. You do actually have to submit writing samples or query them to find out if they will publish your book. In that regard, they are very much like traditional publishing. Where it differs again is that they don't take any of your royalties. Everything that I make for my books is mine to keep. So that was my path. I am, however, querying my mystery novel, which I finished in January. So I'm looking for an agent for that because I do want to try the traditional route. I have shared it with an agent. He's liked the story, but he wants me to work on some rewrites, and he's offered to take a second look at it once it's done. And so once I've completed that, I will resubmit and hope, fingers crossed, that he decides to work with me, and so I can go that traditional route. But overall, the publishing, if you're going to publish, if you want to go traditional, be prepared to work hard at it. Be prepared to get rejected a lot. It's just a thing that happens. But just make sure you do your due diligence in terms of who you query, how you query. Your query letter can be, it's got to be pretty solid. And I would say also that if you have not already done this, one of the best ways to get in front of an agent is to go to conferences. Most conferences will have agents on site. They'll have editors. You can pitch them directly. And at the very least, you can get some feedback on your pitch. If they like it, great. They'll ask for some pages. If they like those pages, they'll ask for more. That happened to me last fall, actually. But that's the place to be because you can find out more about what agents want. But you can also meet people that run small presses. Small presses, indie presses, they don't require agents for authors. You just have to have good product. So if you have a manuscript to submit, think about some of those small presses as well. Send them your manuscript if they're taking submissions, and see what happens. You get a little bit more personal, the personal touch when it comes to publishing in those regards. Those people will actually, know your name, and they will walk that process, walk that path with you as well. So there are a lot of different paths to take. You've got to kind of choose which one works best for you. For my first outing, it was the hybrid publishing. For the next one, I'm trying traditional. If that doesn't work for some reason, I have my hybrid publisher that I can still work with, or I have plenty of small presses that I know about because of my experience over the last few years. I can submit to them as well, and they might be willing to take a chance on me because, one, they know who I am, and they know the type of work that I put out. Yeah.
We're running out of time.
Thank you. Can you tell us, it sounds like you have a full-time job or you have a steady job. How do you handle the work-writing balance? What's your writing schedule like?
Where most writers do a daily word count, I have switched to weekly word counts. I can't write every day because I don't have the energy to do it every day. So if I've got a project I'm working on, for instance, I'm going to be working on book 4 of my urban fantasy series. I know what my word count is I'm going to shoot for in that novel. I divide that up by week. And so that then becomes my weekly count to make sure I hit the goal that I want to hit, I want to finish it by. That means that if I don't write on Monday, I know I can go write on Tuesday, get some words in. If I don't write on Wednesday, I've got Thursday, Friday, Saturday to do that. I write a lot more on the weekends than I do during the week, but at least during the week, I'm putting something toward it. And if you have a weekly goal, at least for me, it doesn't feel as daunting as trying to have a daily goal. So I fit it in when I'm able, but I do at least have a weekly goal when I'm working on something that I want to achieve. Yeah.
Okay. And Marco, did you want to go ahead? You had a question?
Was there one more question online?
Yeah. Marco, did you want to go ahead?
Go ahead, Marco.
Yeah. I was wondering, as a PI, do you file taxes as like an independent contractor or as like a regular employee? Depending on how you're hired.
Yeah, I worked for a company. and I got a steady paycheck, so I would file taxes as an employee of that company. If you are running your own business, you file as that business. You file under either you have to file business taxes, obviously. So depending on what that is, if you're an LLC, you file taxes accordingly. If you are an LLC and you are listed as an employer or employee, that's a whole different tax thing I'm not familiar with. So depending on how you're going to do it or how you're going to run your business or how you're going to run your career, just file taxes according to that particular level that you're at. So if it's an employee, you're going to file like you would any other company. If you are the owner, you're going to file business taxes and all those fun things that go with that.
Okay. So, Dennis, as you can see, we've now adopted you. You're going to have to stay until probably at least 1 o'clock. No, just kidding. Once again, another round of applause for Dennis. Was that not an amazing presentation? Why don't you get out some books while we're finishing up and kind of put those out there? Okay. So I want to tell you about our next month's speaker. And then I do also want to remind everybody again about the anthology. You need to be a paid member. Go look up the information. We'd love to have submissions from people. Volunteers, Jessica will keep bugging everybody until we get more people in the room. And membership, if you're not already a member, we'd love your $25. It really isn't about the money. It's about your ability to take advantage of all of the benefits of membership. Again, you can find that on the website. So our next month's speaker, he's in Colorado, so he will be presenting via Zoom next month. I hope that doesn't discourage people from coming to the room. We like to see your smiling faces. Our speaker is Kevin Eikenberry, and he's going to be speaking on emotional resonance, or subtitled, How I Made My Dad Not Speak to Me for a Week. It's the subtitle of this talk. So Kevin, it says, of all things your characters can do, readers will remember how it made them feel. We'll talk about character development, some tricks and tropes of the trade, and archetypical story structure and how to make our characters grow and change. All of these are ways to get our readers connected to our characters on multiple levels, which is exactly what we want. Kevin Eikenberry is a lifelong space geek and retired Army officer. As an adult, he managed the U.S. Space Camp program and served in space operations before Space Force was a thing. He's an international best-selling science fiction author and renowned writing instructor, which is pretty cool because he never imagined being either of those. He still wants to be an astronaut, he says. Kevin's debut novel, Sleeper Protocol, was hailed by Publishers Weekly as an emotionally powerful debut. A side note on that, Liam, Jessica, and I met Kevin 8 years ago at a Comic-Con in Arizona, and he was just then promoting his very first book. That being said, he now has 25 science fiction novels, including The Crossing, Vendetta Protocol, Eminence Protocol, Runs in the Family, Peacemaker, Honor the Threat, Stand or Fall, Fields of Fire, and Harbinger. He is core author of the mega best-selling Four Horsemen universe, which with more than a dozen novels spawned by Peacemaker. Kevin is an active member of the International Association of Science Fiction and Fantasy Authors, International Thriller Writers, and Sigma, which is the science fiction think tank. Kevin continues to work with space every day and lives in Colorado with his family. So he'll be with us next month. I'm looking forward to that. And that's really about it. Emilio's, we're going to be adjourning, and anyone in the room, unfortunately, all of you who are not here can't participate in this. We have lunch at Emilio's. Dennis will be coming along, so I hope you can. See you all next month.